All right, I am not hearing back from Sage, so for now, I guess we'll assume he can't make it. All right, so let's see. We welcome back everybody from Cephalocon. There was a lot of really good discussion that happened there. Both conversations I was involved in, and then I've been just hearing over time that there are lots of other things that were going on too. So uh, probably I'm hoping for lots of good work that will come out of that. But let's start out here with some of these pull requests that have been kind of happening in the background. So this recovery ops initialized by client op higher priority, or give recovery ops initialized by client op a higher priority. Sage approved that. I don't actually know that it was extensively tested yet, which would be good to find out to make sure it actually is doing what it claims to do here. But I guess the idea is that you don't end up blocking client ops when you're trying to limit total bandwidth available for recovery. Anyway, okay, so yeah, that probably needs testing from somebody. Jason had what looked like a nice little PR for the async messenger that avoids syscalls for outbound messages. Helps primarily with small ops. Looked like I think maybe a 10 to 15% performance increase with no decrease for large ops. So that's exciting. I always like to see messenger improvements like that. Nice win. There's this Igor has this garbage collection PR for avoiding excessive blob count growth in Blue Store. And I don't know if this actually changes performance yet, but potentially it might. So I threw the performance tag on it, but that's, I assume, I haven't looked at the PR, but I assume that that's kind of a complex PR. So that definitely needs more testing and probably needs more reviews since I guess it failed our tests. Okay, there's this multi-site sync fairness. I don't know anything about that. Casey, is that what's going on there?
Uh, Performance tag probably isn't relevant there. It's just about sharing work between gateways and multi-site.
Okay, it's probably relevant, I guess.
Yeah,
Is it?
I would like to eventually see some measurement to confirm that it's spreading work as we expect it to, but yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so that's new stuff. Stuff that's closed. There's so this came out of Cephalocon apparently. This OSD parallel clean PG on maps PR. Um, it apparently fixes kind of a terrible case when you have a huge number of OSDs and speeds things up dramatically. So that sounds good. I think Sage had one hang up on it, but apparently they resolved it and it's been merged. So that's cool. Let's see. There's optimized object overflow detection in journal RBD for RBD. That's been merged. A couple of different Crimson performance things, both merged by Kifu. Um, this librd tweaks to increase IOPS and reduce CPU usage. That looked significant. Really, really big performance improvements there, which I'm curious what, given some of the other performance improvements that we've been seeing in librd, specifically around some of the work that Jason's done with uh, the IO scheduling and not exactly the cache, but just some of those other tweaks. I'm very curious what the aggregate differences are there, because this looks huge, so that's good. There's this RGW allow RGW Rados GW admin to list buckets in unordered. For some reason, I thought that had already merged, but I guess not. So that's there. That's merged. Load PGs OSD load PGs can be improved from single thread. That did not get merged. The author of that PR said that his company was no longer willing to make the changes open source, um, or release them as open source. So he has withdrawn that pull request. So anyway, that's that. Um, we've got Blue Store PR here for supporting prefetch in buffered read mode. I think that's Igor's uh, uh, read ahead stuff that he did. That must have shown some benefit beyond just the upgrading RocksDB to get the adaptive read ahead. So Sage merged that, and yeah, it looked like it improved things pretty dramatically. So that's fantastic. And then there was this old PR from Majian Peng for batching handle send message that was just languishing. I think he closed it. So that's about it for stuff that's new and that's closed. Lots of updated stuff in here. Atom stuff continues to be updated. I think Casey's been doing reviews on it, it looked like. My avoiding double caching in Blue Store for onodes, that's do not merge for now. We decided that we're gonna redo that on top of Adam's sharding work, just because it's gonna hurt his stuff probably more than his stuff hurts mine. So, and that will also then make it so that we can have his rollback and upgrade tool support my changes as well. So I think that'll be good. There's some updates on the IOU ring work. Roman went back and fixed the locking in it and made some other updates. Apparently it works now. So it wasn't working before Cephalocon, but apparently it works now, but it is slower. So it may not show the same performance gains that it was showing previously. I need to go back and retest that. I haven't done so yet.
Slower than baseline or slower than it might have been?
He didn't say.
Oh, okay, just slower.
Yep. So we'll find out, I guess. But in general, still there's a kind of a bigger question of whether or not the way that we're implementing it here, kind of abusing our existing AIO code, is really the right way to do this either. We might be able to kind of improve this if we split kernel device out into separate AIO sync and IOU ring implementations, like just really separate them. Right now it's all kind of munged together and not a real great way. So anyway, yeah, we can definitely test what he's got at this point, and then maybe decide how to proceed on it. Let's see, there's Kifu's implement a user space IO get event. I guess it looks like Kifu updated that, but that's exciting. That may give us a performance boost. What else? This one from Majian Peng has been updated. It just need to be rebased. No other movement on that. This one from Roman about ePoll events from user space. I hadn't looked that closely at it, but Kifu did a review and it looked like support for that is not even in the kernel yet. So that's very experimental. That's going to be a while probably before that lands in master. Auto tuning of the MDS cache. That work continues to go on with that. Patrick's reviewed it. I reviewed it. Some changes are being made. That's good. I'd like to talk more about auto tuning of everything in general, possibly later, but we'll see if we have time. And then, okay, there's a PR here that from Igor, make auto tuning more aggressive on startup. I looked at that a while back and was not totally sure it made sense, but I need to review it again. I owe Igor a review on that, and I've owed it to him for a while. So I'm going to try to get to that soon. So that's about it. No movement on a bunch of other stuff. Yeah. All right. So maybe before I get into some of the stuff I've got on here, does anyone have any topics that they would like to bring up this week themselves?
Probably on the Crimson side, I will add I plan to integrate the uh, performance test into our CI. That's a plan. Probably it will also apply to some of apply to Ceph also. Basically, the idea is to perform the performance test when a PR is posted and it's labeled with some labels. For example, it could be labeled with needs performance test, something like that. And our Jenkins lab will pull in the PR and run a very basic set of smoke test to provide the change and compare the result with the baseline stored on Sepia. We run the CBT test periodically on Sepia also, so we can compare the result with the baseline stored on Sepia to find out if the PR could incur some significant performance regression. If that's the case, the Jenkins will vote down the PR. Otherwise, it will show the thumbs up. That's the plan.
Okay.
Currently, I'm pretty gone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say this is a fantastic topic to bring up. So I had a conversation with Alfredo over Cephalicon about the exact same thing. And what you just described sounds a lot like what we were thinking about, specifically being able to tag pull requests with specific tags or to look at existing tags and say, okay, we want to run certain kinds of benchmarks based on what tags these have and see if there's a difference versus master.
Yes, as a test, we're also building as a part of more like a extension of currently the make check test. It won't be a part of a make test for sure, but it will be extension of it. So with automatically make machinery, we will be able to, like, for example, bisect to find out the offending commit. If we fail to do so, when catching it when it was a PR, we can catch it afterwards, like post-mortem diagnosis.
Yeah, and I've done a number of those. They're having something like this would be fantastic to avoid having to do that quite as often.
Yeah.
So Alfredo right now is currently on PTO for several weeks, but he did express a lot of interest in potentially working on something like this. Alfredo, or sorry, Kifu, how quickly do you need this kind of capability?
Currently, it involves a couple steps. The first thing I need to do is for most important, the whole idea is to improve the performance, to keep the performance of Crimson OSD, to prevent it from degradation. So the first thing is to package Crimson OSD, and the next thing is to pick some very typical test which can present the performance of Crimson OSD. And I think it will be Rados bench because we don't support RBD test now, and we don't support FIO test for sure. And the next thing is to find some representative test suite or test. We can use the result to compare them with those in CBT, and I think that's pretty much that would be enough.
Sure.
Yes. And I'm not sure if Scipia or Polito could offer APIs that we can pull out a result from a given commit with a certain set of parameters. But if we cannot do it, we need to pull the possible commits and to find out, to try our luck, because we have no API to query for a certain combination of API or combination of parameter and for a given commits. We just need to try our luck because not every commit is tested using CPT, right? So that's a pain. We need an
Yeah.
API
Yeah.
for querying the results.
Yeah. Yep. So Orlando, this is what I was talking about a little bit in the email thread that we had going, where if we had some kind of mechanism for taking the result directory that we can produce. So right now in CBT we have kind of this concept where every single result directory is a hash of all of the parameters that were used to create a particular result. And from that, kind of the idea, long-term idea, was that we would create maybe an SQL-lite index of these things and be able to have like a query interface in front of it. So you can say, show me all of the results over time, or all of the results from this particular run that were 4K or something, or 4K reads, or 4K rand reads, or whatever. And the parameter space is absolutely huge. When we started CBT, it was like this kind of nested directory structure for the results of the different parameters that were used to create them, and it quickly became totally ridiculous. So we need something like this. Potentially, I could see if we were clever about how well we did this, we could have it be very usable on the command line for the kind of interactive testing that we use CBT for oftentimes right now, but then also make it so that it could work within this kind of framework you're talking about, Kifu, where we have tests that get run on PR submissions, and we are adding results periodically into some kind of small database, or even multiple databases. It wouldn't necessarily have to be centralized, but then make it so that it's queryable from somewhere, and be able to look through things and compare things. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, so when you say it's queryable, is that also query by commit, or based on like the PR that it's being tested on?
I think we could, if we wanted to, in CBT's output, when it dumps a result, have some of that as metadata that could be associated with the result, regardless if it's through our system or if it's someone running it locally. We could pull that out potentially. So we could. I don't think it would necessarily.
Actually, when
SHA-1 would be the
I was
natural thing, right?
discussing,
Yeah, exactly, Sam.
And then if you put it into, I actually think it probably should be a centralized database, just for simplicity, just something in the CP lab. For every run, you would be able to compare a bunch of different bits from different times, right?
Sam, the thing that I would, the way I was kind of looking at this potentially would be that you could have it be centralized, but I'd like this to look more almost like an index, or of basically like a directory full of results, rather than as kind of the authoritative thing.
So the reason for this is that over time, if we're running these things in Jenkins over on PRs,
yes,
or nightly, then it's nice to have a place you can go to find everything that happened over the last 6 months.
Sure, but the implementation of that would be basically you've got a directory of results and you've got an index for it, and that can be the centralized location where something from like PR runs is run, but you can also have independent ones like this if you're doing one-off testing somewhere else.
I get that it can be configurable. I'm just saying it would be valuable for there to be a central one.
Sure.
People have the option to use, and that we can point to Jenkins and such.
Yeah. So yeah, let's see. In terms of the hardware that we run it on, right now I'm rather concerned that what we've got running in the Ceph lab is too noisy to be super useful. Maybe, but if we could get this running on dedicated hardware, I think it would be much better. hardware specifically that doesn't have like software updates that happen randomly. If we control those on scheduled at scheduled timing, independently of the rest of the Sepia lab, I think that would be very good. So kind of the thought I had was that once we get the new nodes in the lab, I personally think those are most useful in the hands of developers. We potentially could split off a couple of them for this kind of thing, but I think from my perspective, getting repurposing the Inserta nodes to kind of do this kind of thing would be a really good use for them. They're still fast enough that they showcase differences in code pretty well. They may not hit everything, and they may not quite test everything that Crimson will eventually be, but for right now, I think they would serve pretty well. Any thoughts on that, Kifu or anyone else?
I think this came up earlier as well, and it has come up again. We need to fix the space of the hardware so that we have valid baselines to compare against. Because if you're trying to compare master on machine A and master on machine B, there's definitely going to be different results. So we need to fix what that set of machines look like. And I think repurposing the old inserters is a good idea, and just renaming them and making them accessible using like the tautology and stuff will probably help.
So I'm a little nervous about having them used by, well, maybe used by tautology. I guess I don't know. How does the current Jenkins stuff work? Is tautology involved at all in any of the current Jenkins testing?
I don't think currently Jenkins Slave is sharing with the tautologist testing nodes. No.
So
but I think what we can do.
Tautology does reimaging.
Sorry, what was that, Sam?
Is it that you're worried about the way tautology does reimaging?
Well, I guess kind of what that might be fine. I'm more wondering, I suspect that if we start regularly testing PRs for performance, we will be able to use every single one of the Inserta nodes like 24/7. So I'm wondering, is there any point to even bringing it into tautology?
Are you proposing to test every PR as when it's merged, when it is uploaded in the full regression run?
In this case, just performance and probably just the ones that are tagged as such.
And I think it's not going to be as much as we are thinking, because only a few PRs will get tagged as performance on a particular day, and we can probably batch them, and it shouldn't be as much.
Well, automating and batching aren't super friendly, right, to each other. I guess the back end could do it, but it wouldn't be able to attribute performance changes to any particular PR.
Right. Yeah.
The whole point of tagging them was that we think any one of them could have changed performance.
Yeah, I mean, even if we don't batch,
the alternative
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, since the alternative is for someone to actually go and test it, for the ones who were going to tag, this would, I don't know. I remember having a lot of trouble merging anything performance related because I never had any evidence that it would help. So this would let us get fast evidence, especially for small patches, which would be really, really good.
Yep. One thing I also want to do with this beyond just performance is I think that we should run benchmarks, but where we are focused on collecting data rather than just looking at performance numbers. I would absolutely love to be able to go and just look at some change that somebody's made that potentially impacts performance and see a wall clock profile without having to run it myself. That would be fantastic. So, that potentially doubles the burden right there, where we want to look at a run that's just focused on the performance of the result from the PR, but then also how that PR is actually changing the behavior, potentially of the OSD, potentially of the client, if it's librd or RGW or something else. the parameter space explodes really, really quickly. And some of the tests that we are going to want to run are ones that we're going to want to age the system, whatever gets deployed, the cluster. A number of the tests potentially are going to require actually having multiple Incerta nodes set up in a real cluster rather than just a one-off one node test. So in terms of the usage here, we could very easily end up consuming a lot of resources for this. It's not, that.
We don't have to with version 0, right? Version 0 doesn't have to accomplish everything.
No, absolutely. Agreed, Sam. Agreed. I'm just saying that kind of the sky's the limit here, right? Like we will not have any trouble utilizing these resources. So that the only reason I mentioned Teuthology and whether or not to involve it is I don't know if it's useful or not for specifically this task of PR testing. Maybe it is. People that know Teuthology better than I do might have strong opinions there. I just don't want to end up dividing these resources in a way that makes it so that they're less useful in both places.
Yeah, it's possible that the value of Teuthology here wouldn't be that these become used for Teuthology tests. It's that Teuthology knows how to rapidly reimage a node. And for consistency and reliability purposes, that might be helpful. But I think I'm with Mark. Sure. We don't necessarily want to use Teuthology simply because it exists. Just if that's the easiest way to get sort of multi-Jenkins instance access or doing for limited resources, that kind of thing.
Yeah. On a side note with Teuthology and potentially this is we really need to fix the scheduling system in Teuthology so that it properly lets you ask for lots of nodes and eventually get them. It sounds like that's maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that was still an issue where things would just time out.
Even so, for version 0 of this, a 3-node cluster would be sufficient. There's a lot of times you're just testing, did this thing improve the whatever IPC?
Yeah.
Right, and that would show up even on one node.
Yeah, honestly,
it's actually 2 now, and if that's fine, that's good. But the number's 2, not 3.
It's okay. It's okay. Version 0 of this can be like single OSD tests, right? I mean, that's where we can start with this probably, and that would probably be by itself super useful. So okay, it sounds like people generally seem to be supportive of the idea of repurposing Incerta for this once we've got the new gear. Is that right?
Yep.
We get to keep Incerta, right?
I think so. Right? That's right, Tushar?
Tushar doesn't want it back.
I'm going to take the silence as acceptance of that statement.
Absolutely.
So, yep. So yeah. So okay, let's plan on that then. Once we get the new Officinalis hardware in, and that tested and set up and ready for use, then we'll start thinking about how we can take some of the Incerta gear. I think I am going to want to keep 1 or 2 of the nodes, maybe kind of just separate for kind of one-off testing, so that we can do kind of ongoing comparison testing with the new gear and other gear. We've seen evidence that different hardware behaves differently with some of the RocksDB tunings that people have tried. So it wouldn't be terrible to just have 1 or 2 of those nodes available kind of for one-off stuff. But certainly I think 6 of the 8 we could donate to this and make it pretty useful. Maybe even 7. All right, good. For the new gear, the new Officinalis gear, my assumption has always been that gear will be most useful in the hands of developers who are, especially the Crimson guys. And Sam, you too, Ronan and Igor from Suze. I would like to get on there as well. They are doing a lot of really good work. Is that a valid assumption? Am I thinking about that right?
Right, what's up?
I've been operating under the assumption that getting some of this new gear that we're getting in, the aficionalis gear that's going to have the Optane drives in it. Eventually it's going to have the DIMM versions of those, and basically top bin CPUs, NVMe drives, the whole works. My assumption has been that getting that into the hands of developers is more useful than having it, being completely dedicated just to doing kind of the kind of random Ceph testing that kind of the Incertas, half of them currently are doing. I would like to get one of those into your hands, Sam. I'd like to get it into Roman's hands at Suze, into Igor's hands, into the Crimson developers' hands. People that actually can make use of this stuff. That's always been kind of my assumption that's most useful. Is that a good assumption? Like, would you use this, Sam, if you had one of them?
Today, not as much, but when we start working on C-Store, definitely. When we're doing specific, it's one of those things where on a particular day it would be very useful, and a different day it would be nice. Maybe it would be better if someone else used it or we're in a pool, right? But I don't know that it's assigned specifically to me, given that there are a finite number of them, right? And it's not that hard to move things in and out of the pool being used for testing, right? Or for performance progression stuff.
Yeah. It's kind of more of a question of
If the question is it super valuable to have one available now and again? Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Maybe the bigger question.
There's no substitute for actually having access to those memory DIMMs.
So we can schedule them like we schedule other stuff through Teuthology. We could go that route. Kind of the route with Incerta that we've done has been more like kind of long-term leases where people tend to kind of congregate on the node that they've got and do testing there. Radek and Adam have both done quite a bit like that. I do quite a bit like that. We could kind of operate more in that fashion rather than the totally kind of short-term lease Teuthology model. But I'm open. Whatever people think is useful. We can adopt different techniques. So, what do people think?
The Teuthology model actually works pretty well for this because things are separated in the queues by machine type. So if we don't have cron job scheduling things for this machine type, or we don't make it widely available for other tests, we can just use the locking framework to track who's got it, using it currently, and actually automate with the rest of the nodes that are available.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. There should definitely be some like this so that people can answer questions like how does this perform for something that isn't being continuously developed like Crimson.
Sure. So initially we were going to have 10 of them. The thought I had is on Incerta we kind of split it halfway. We've got 4 that people are using in kind of a one-off fashion for doing testing and development and things, and another 4 that I use quite a bit for doing just small cluster testing, kind of some of these more targeted performance tests, and then also that I double up for some of my development stuff. We could stick all 10 of these in Teuthology and just totally go that way. We could split some of them off and have them kind of operating kind of like Incerta does currently. What do people want? What do people think?
So Mark, can you hear me now? This is Tushar.
Yes. Hey, Tushar.
Okay. So sorry, I had some audio issues earlier. So for one, Incerta is not going anywhere. It's staying. The other thing I was gonna mention was, for these new nodes to be useful, even for development, you would need essentially, need to pair them with a load generator, right? Like, for example, we could do local testing, but we could have some of the Incerta nodes, maybe 1 or 2 as load generators for or CBT, basically tester nodes for uh, for the new officeness nodes is what I was thinking. So uh, and in general, I agree with the proposal that we dedicate maybe half of the nodes for development. Uh, I was wondering if some of the regression testing that we want to do could be done on Officinus because it's the latest and greatest hardware, right? I mean,
Sure.
that would be interesting to run the regressions on. And I think it was Neha pointing out that we need a baseline, which could be maybe a 5-node baseline on the latest gen hardware, because the previous gen, the inserter nodes actually have probably the older CPUs, but they have the P3700 devices, which are actually in some sense, like at least in the right performance point of view, they're actually better. So so it'll be good to use maybe half of the nodes as this baseline and keep them running for doing the performance regressions would be my
Sure.
suggestion. But I'm
Okay.
open to whatever works for other developers.
Okay. Certainly, one thing that could be interesting maybe would be like you were saying with the new official analysis nodes, if we have tagged PRs in the system that are really performance sensitive, right? Like things that are coming in from Crimson that we aren't expecting to be able to measure well, on the older gear. That especially could be really interesting. That kind of regression testing on the new, or maybe even on both, right? And then we get kind of a multi-system view of what's going on. That could be really useful. Yeah.
Yeah. So we could split the two clusters, basically eight node and 10 node clusters as maybe three or more nodes out of the inserter cluster, or maybe 5 nodes each for performance regressions, and then that could also be scheduled to be used by developers. But then those could also be pulled out to do like focus testing that you do, for example, right? Be good to
Yeah.
reserve 5 each, for example, or 3 each. 3 is probably also good enough. That way, it leaves more nodes for developers. So
Yeah. In terms of load generation, I'm hoping that we may be able to swing some additional hardware from one source or another that we could use on the 25 gig network for load generation specifically for the efficient analysis nodes. Don't know where that's going exactly yet, but I would very much like to get some additional nodes in there that that we can use for that purpose. We could use Inserta for that, and we could stick like 25 gig cards in those if we really wanted to. I'm just wondering if, since we've already got the 40 gig cards and the 40 gig switch that they're on, if if we can make use of the Inserta nodes kind of in still a performance test capacity rather than just as load generators, it might be a better way to use all that existing hardware that's there. But we can certainly play around with it. It might depend on what other hardware we can get. I did notice Ronan here had commented in the chat window that the scheduling is going to be must be simple and fast, otherwise it's a major pain, and that'd be better to split some for dedicated Crimson use. That is kind of the feeling I had too. That it would be really good to have a couple of these that the Crimson developers can just almost have dedicated to them. But if that's not really the case, if that's not what people are if they don't think they'd be able to use it enough on a regular basis for that, certainly we could then have it more on a scheduling basis.
I think we need some balance.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so
sometimes we can share the exact for Crimson development, we can actually share the same machine. We can ping our application to a certain core, and if we and use a certain hard drive or SSD drive or partition of it, so it can be shared actually if we do it well.
Okay.
We don't
Kifu,
need to occupy the whole box, right?
I don't know, Kifu, I guess, is,
The
you know
point
better
is
than
that
I.
we're able to ping a certain thread. Crimson currently Crimson OCD is a single thread application, so we can ping our application to a single one or more cores, assuming that there are like 20 or 50 or 40 cores dispensable on a single box. So the box can be shared by Crimson development, even even for testing. If even to do the sharing right, that's my point. But we needed to set up a policy to do it.
I guess it seems to me that you'd want, at the very least, to be able to kind of have the node quiet when any given developer is going to use it for some of kind of the very sensitive tests that you'd want to do. Is that right, Kifu?
Yes, just don't want to intervene with the other developers. So we can actually allocate a certain machine to be shared by all Crimson developers, as long as we don't need to use all cores and use the whole hardware queue of a certain SSD or NVMe drive.
And
locking thing seems like an adequate solution to that problem. You wouldn't actually use Topology to run anything, but the locking machinery would allow people to agree on who's using a particular node.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll if folks are perfectly cool with just doing the locking through Topology, let's add them to Topology then. Let's go that route. One of the things with Inserta that probably was kind of tough in the past is that since they were kind of separate, it was a little bit of a double-edged sword. The good thing was that it made it so that people could kind of treat them as similar to the way that some of the other development boxes in the lab, I guess. I don't know what they are now. I don't actually use them, but there have been some dedicated boxes for development that I don't think were part of Topology. And that there are some advantages to that, right? You have a little bit more control over it. You don't have to worry quite as much about getting rid of stuff and moving stuff away once you're done with it or whatever. But on the other hand, this would open these boxes up to a lot more people potentially. So if that's what people want to do, let's do it. At least for some of them.
Yeah, it seems like we have a centralized way to track the machines now, so why not use that?
Sure. Josh,
And you
do
can
you think
mark some of them as like reserved for Crimson testing or something, and just share those however you like internally.
Sure.
They don't have to be all swap back and forth every individually.
Josh and Sam, do you see Topology then still being useful for provisioning the machines for Jenkins use? Is that something we should do?
I think it'd be nice to be able to provision them on unlock, honestly. But I don't know how hard that is. So, yeah. That's just an implementation, whatever's easiest kind of question, I think.
Yeah.
If it's easy to make the existing deployment stuff, like work on these nodes, then I think we should, because that's easy, right?
Sure. Yeah, I just don't know how we do it right now, I guess, is what, the stuff that's used for Jenkins, if we do that now or if they're, whoever, I don't even know who maintains any of that. So,
I think the Jenkins stuff is mostly VMs right now. But the Topology stuff is mostly reprovisioning bare metal machines. every time. So the nice aspect of that is that it forces you to make sure you're setting up machines in exactly the same way every time.
And you can install packages without guilt, and you don't, like, Assertive 5 has been running for 2 years, apparently, without being rebooted. So you'd avoid things like that.
Okay. Well, I guess, I mean, we could maybe just with all of the inserta and then all of the officinalis, have it everything just go through straight through Teuthology, tag some of the machines as being like Jenkins, slaves or whatever. Take some of them as Crimson development, and then don't use Teuthology to schedule stuff, but just use it for provisioning and then let those things go. Is that a plan?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Seems very plausible.
Okay, I will write it down. Cool. I did not type that even close to right. Snellis, Certa, migrate to Teuthology for locking purposes. Cool. All right. Well, anything else on that conversation, or are we done with that one?
Hey, Mark, I just want to make sure I understand if we are on the same page. Are we going to allocate some box for Crimson testing in Jenkins slave? Are we? Okay.
I think it's just you'd lock it through Teuthology and then leave it locked.
Okay.
Yep. So some of these nodes essentially exactly as Sam said. We basically just they'd be listed in Teuthology. The advantage, right, is that we know where they are. They can be reprovisioned easily, but they're basically just locked for Jenkins.
But Teuthology does not share test nodes with Jenkins. They're in a different system. One is managed by Jenkins master, and another is managed by Pedal.
Teuthology is sort of several different systems. We don't, in this instance, we'd just be using the database that knows what nodes are locked for. So you just lock one of the nodes with a node or use some Crimson Jenkins, and then it would be left alone. Nothing would happen to it. So you just point Jenkins at that node.
But the Jenkins master understands this, talk to the database?
No, you have to set up the Jenkins master to do. You would have to separately set up the Jenkins master to do that, but you have to do that anyway, right? The advantage of doing it this way is that if something gets messed up with that node, you can drop it and reserve a new one.
Okay.
And then just switch the Jenkins master over. It just means everyone has a shared understanding of which nodes are being used for what.
Yes, I just don't think Jenkins has such kind of a plugin to talk to Teuthology.
No, it doesn't. Whoever configures it would have to go configure Jenkins separately.
Okay.
To point directly at that host. That part isn't different.
Yeah. Which means we need to do some development on Jenkins side.
Conceivably.
Hopefully, though, Kifu, the idea here would be that we still kind of keep everything separate, right? The only reason that we're using Teuthology here is so that the node can be easily like reprovisioned, and it's like listed somewhere as this is what it is and this is what it's being used for. Theoretically, it would be like no different from the Jenkins perspective than if you just like installed CentOS on the node and had it dedicated. I think, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's.
I just wanted to make sure that we have some dedicated box for performance test, which can be scheduled by a PR. That's all. Instead of using Teuthology suite to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
how many... we can expose the Teuthology as a service, which can be called by Jenkins. That would be fantastic, but we are not that far yet.
Yeah, I'm not thinking that crazy myself. I'm thinking like Duthology is literally just like provisioning the node and handing it over, and that's as far as Duthology is involved.
I see.
I mean, maybe someday we could do something more extensive than that, but that sounds complicated and not fun. So, this would be more like we've got 6 of the inserta nodes and like 4 of the officinalis or 2 or whatever of the officinalis nodes just dedicated to Jenkins, and then maybe the inserta nodes are what just kind of run of the mill performance stuff gets scheduled to run some tests on. Maybe for like really critical stuff, we run tests on officinalis and inserta, or just officinalis. Lots of options there. We don't have to decide right now, but would have some number of them available for going through and doing this. And we want this not just with Crimson. We want this with classic OSD too. This would be super useful.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So we talked about that. I do think Alfredo would like to be involved in this when he gets back. So just keep that in mind. He's got a lot of experience with the Jenkins system, and I think I can certainly get him up to speed on CBT as well. We can run Rados Bench through CBT, and that would pick up some of the monitoring stuff that it does and some of the other kind of benefits that we get there. So I would say that we should maybe sooner rather than later start getting Crimson working through it. That would be useful in a variety of ways. So Kifu, we can maybe talk about that more later.
Sure.
And then the only other thing I had on my list here that I wanted to quick get in before people leave is that we've been talking to the TRocksDB guys at Toshiba. Adam has been doing a ton of work on both RocksDB sharding and looking at that, and he has found that it does in fact improve write amplification significantly during compaction. I don't know if we have like really easy to consume results yet, but certainly he's very positive about it. So we're hoping that one, we can make sure that upgrade testing works when you switch this on. That has to work. The TRocksDB guys are looking at potentially adding the ability to downgrade back to a standard RocksDB format from kind of the version that they've got. And then assuming that all of this looks good, works, seems to function and improve compaction results, we're hoping that maybe we can go to the Facebook guys and say that this is actually useful. We would support the TROX guys in an effort to maybe bring this into upstream RocksDB. So we're not to that point yet, but certainly there's a lot of hopeful signs that this may be generally useful for RocksDB and also useful for Ceph. So yep, that's kind of the current status there. Any questions on that at all? All right. Well, that's all I've got, and we are out of time. So have a great week, guys. Really good discussion, and yeah, we'll be moving forward on the new gear here, hopefully in the coming weeks, and get it into people's hands. So that's it.
Thanks.
Have a good week, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Later.
Thanks.
Bye.